Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
Just ahead of Farhan, a reminder that all of today's guests are brought to you by Optic Foliar as we bring in from TSN, Farhan Lalji. Thanks for doing this, sir. How are you?
I'm good. I figured you'd get to me eventually. You know, Henderson's a little slow at the switch from time to time.
Most of the time.
Listen, I'll take the blame for that. I don't mind it, and I know Ryan won't, even though we won't get into it. Hey, what a weekend coming up. I know you loved what happened with the college football playoffs and all that, but super wild card weekend. So 6 games. Is there one that you look at as the best upset possibility? I've got 3 candidates: Eagles over Bucks, Pittsburgh over KC, Patriots over Bills. What do you think?
I don't know what you're smoking if you're thinking KC's got any chance to lose to Pittsburgh. There is no path to victory for the Pittsburgh Steelers. 0, none. That said, to me, 49ers, Cowboys. I think the Cowboys right now, what they've shown us in terms of their overall record versus their form, I'm not buying into the Cowboys at all. I'm not buying stock in them at all. I mean, I look at them offensively, and they've been, the end totals look good at the end of the year, but anybody that's watched them can attest to just how inconsistent they've been offensively. They're banged up at various spots. Dak Prescott's been up and down. He's missed open receivers. The running game, depending on the health status, it's been up and down. Amari Cooper's been average. Gallup's hurt. So I look at them offensively, and I think that they're in prime position to just stub their toe. And defensively, I know people talk about Diggs and they talk about Micah Parsons, who's been incredible. Mm-hmm. But this is a team that relies on turnovers and they rely on red zone. They give up a lot of yards. They're among the worst teams in the league as far as 3 and outs are concerned. You can get yardage and you can move the ball against this team. And if they don't generate turnovers, I think they're going to have some challenges. Even against a backup offense for the Philadelphia Eagles, that game was 17-17 in the second quarter. They were giving up yards. So I just think they are primed for an upset. And you look at San Francisco, the way they're running the ball, they have the ability to keep the ball away from Dak, and that's going to force Dak to press when he gets the ball. So that's my number 1 upset pick. But Pittsburgh, KC, come on, Donnie.
No. Well, you went right off the board there with the San Francisco over Dallas pick. I hope and pray that for the sake of next week that Pittsburgh upsets KC. Is there an obvious, Farhan, Super Bowl favorite?
I don't think there is. I think even when you look at Green Bay, I think there's some flaws from time to time in terms of what they do, right? And obviously, Aaron Rodgers is as good as it gets. But I don't think there's an obvious. I look at Tennessee, who's sitting there, at the number 1 seed in the AFC, and they get Derrick Henry back. But, there's still some questions in their pass game. Defensively, Kansas City showed some warts against Cincinnati. You look at Cincinnati themselves, they're young. You look at Tampa Bay, they haven't looked like they're the same defensive unit that they were a year ago going into the playoffs. And then, offensively for them, they're not as explosive because they've lost guys like Godwin. They've lost guys like Antonio Brown, and Fournette enters the playoffs hurt. So even though Brady, you look at his passing numbers that he's put up this year, third best passing total all time. It's incredible, but I see some warts there, so I don't know that there's an obvious heavy favorite right now. I think there's favorites, but heavy favorite, I don't know.
Hey, Farhan, let's go to the BC Lions. They signed Lucky Whitehead. Bryan Burnham's next. I've been told, boy, that's going to be tough. It's going to be really tough to get that guy signed, and Mike Riley. So tell us what you think about Burnham coming back and Mike Riley.
Burnham was in a position a year ago where he could have signed early before the free agent window opened for about $160,000. He chose not to. Thought there'd be somebody on the open market that would hit it out of the park for him and make him want to leave, and there wasn't. And eventually he signed for $135 to come back to BC. So when you're Burnham and you see what Lucky Whitehead is making, you're not going to settle for what you made previously. So can the Lions get Burnham done in the 160 to 170 range? Possibly. Do you want to be paying receivers that amount of money? Hard to say. But the Lions are in a position where they are not like Winnipeg. They are not like a number of other teams that are just better constructed as far as their rosters go. Winnipeg has got to pay Willie Jefferson and Jackson Jeffcoat, and they did that. They've got some high-end offensive linemen that they've got to pay, and they did that. So that makes it tough to pay a receiver, above 170, right? So it's going to be tough for them with Kenny Lawler. The Lions aren't paying those guys, right? Like, they don't have elite offensive linemen. They don't have elite defensive linemen. So they might have the money to pay Bryan Burnham, but league-wide, he's viewed a little differently. And I actually did this poll where I talked to GMs and coaches for every team other than BC, Winnipeg, and Saskatchewan. I talked to the other 6 teams in the last 24 hours and said, rate these guys: Lawler, Duke Williams, and Bryan Burnham. And it was all over the board, right? So there's some people that view Burnham as this guy that wins contested balls, that's a leader, that's a veteran in your organization. And there's others that view him as a 31-year-old who makes contested catches because he can't separate anymore, right? So there's a wide variety, there's a wide range on how Burnham is viewed. So I don't know if you throw him out in the open market, there's going to be 4 or 5 teams that want to pay him huge dollars. So maybe the Lions can get him in that 160, 170 range, and maybe they can afford to pay receivers that much for at least one more year, because there aren't going to be those elite offensive linemen and defensive linemen that you can go out and pay and get in free agency. I think all those guys are going to get signed by the time we get to February 9th.
And quickly, Farhan, we're running out of time thanks to Ryan here. I know you had some things to say. I know it's a bit outdated, but you had some things to say on Twitter about Brandon Staleys' controversial timeout over the weekend.
Yeah, it's funny because I was furious when it happened, just because from a coaching standpoint, how can you do that and completely change the momentum of a game? But, on the flip side, why he did it on some levels made a little bit of sense, just in terms of wanting to get better defensive players out there to stop the run. Ultimately, it didn't work. Now, I believe that from a Raider standpoint, once that timeout got taken, you didn't know what would happen after that play in terms of a timeout, right? Because they still had one more left. So, I think I'm not going to say they got more aggressive because they didn't throw the ball versus running the ball, but I think from an offensive standpoint, you buckle up a little bit more. You push a little bit harder, because now you think, okay, they might call a timeout after the next one, and we may have to kick the ball away at that point. So we better work a little bit harder to get this first down. Whereas on the previous 2 plays, it looked like they were content to run the ball and settle for a tie. So I think it didn't necessarily affect them strategically, but it did affect their mindset and their focus and seriousness going into the next play. So it did hurt the Chargers, and I believe that's a big reason why they're not in the playoffs. But, if you got the better run personnel and you stop them, maybe you're in this situation as well. So, I'll walk myself back a little bit from my comment where I thought it was fireable, but I still think it was the wrong decision.
And to sum this interview up, you're picking the Steelers over the Chiefs. Okay, Farhan, thanks so much for this. Appreciate it.
0 chance.
0.
Oh, I hope and pray. Awesome, Farhan. Thanks so much, and sorry for the time issues here. Farhan Lalji, TSN.